What's up, guys? Today I want to talk about the history of Redstone. So I am to tell you how Redstone has evolved over the years with each update. I also want to talk more in depth about the major changes that they added when they added components that were basically game changers to how Redstone was done. So with that, let's jump right in. Alpha 1.0.1 was the update that they added Redstone into the game. All of the components that you see here were added into the game, except for the wooden door, which already existed, but they added the functionality to be controlled with Redstone in this update. Now, at this point in the game, Redstone was purely binary. You really only used redstone dust and redstone torches when you were making circuits. Maybe you had a lever or a button on like the input or something, but really it was just redstone dust and torches. So in order to make some of the contraptions that we know and love today, you had to put in a much more significant amount of work in order to get it to work. Alpha 1.0.14 brought us jukeboxes as well as a handful of music discs, otherwise known as CDs if you're old like me. Beta 1.2 added dispensers and note blocks. These two things work pretty much exactly the same as they do today, other than the fact that back then, the dispenser only interacted with 3 items that it didn't drop on the ground as an entity. I believe it was like snowballs, eggs, and maybe arrows, but probably something else. And note blocks also had less blocks back then that they could go under it and change the sound. We have a lot more options today, but otherwise they worked exactly the same way. Beta 1.3 is the best update because it added redstone repeaters, as well as this is when I got the game. That's why it's the best update. Repeaters are really useful because before repeaters existed, you had to do something like this, where in order to refresh the signal, because the signal back then still ran out after 15 blocks, you had to do 2 torches in a series like this, which is exactly what a repeater does, where you turn it on and then the output turns on and it refreshes the signal. The problem with this is it's bulky and it takes 2 redstone ticks in order to go all the way through. Whereas if you use a repeater, you can do it with 1 redstone tick and it takes 1 block to do it, which is really convenient. Now, even more convenient is the repeater's ability to change their delay to a longer delay than 1 redstone tick. Because back then, before repeaters existed, the only way to delay things was to chain a bunch of redstone torches together. That was pretty much the only way to do that. So if I wanted to do something like this, where I had 3 4-tick repeaters, I would pretty much have to chain 12 redstone torches together. And that got really old really fast. So the addition of redstone repeaters was super convenient. Beta 1.5 added power rails and activator rails. I'm not going to lie, I thought that those were added a lot more recently than 1.5 beta, so that made me feel old. These are really convenient though, because before they were added, you could only go down in minecarts. Like you could maybe push it up like yourself, but in order to get a minecart to go up a hill, there was kind of no way to do that. I made a roller coaster, in fact, I think in 1.4 beta, that you had to go all the way to the top and then you rolled all the way down, but there was no way to get up to the top automatically. You had to like break it, cart it up, and then go down again. So the power rails are really convenient for that, as well as the detector rails allow you to basically keep track of your minecarts and stuff like that, as well as potentially like open doors or whatever when there's a minecart present. Beta 1.6 added wooden trapdoors. I believe it was only oak trapdoors, which I think they're just called trapdoors back then. And you could right click them just like a wooden door and they would open and close, as well as listen to a redstone signal. Now that brings us to 1.7 beta. I have a lot of words to say about 1.7 beta. Now, this was the update that added Pistons into the game. Now, the Pistons were perhaps not the most, like, well done and bug-fixed things in the world. There were instances where you could crash the game and corrupt the entire world save by activating the piston with something that then gets pushed by the piston, such as like this. Like this would power the piston and then the piston would push the redstone torch. We can see now that that doesn't happen. And in fact, it just does nothing. Likewise, if you did this with a pressure plate, it does nothing now, but you could potentially crash the world and corrupt the entire world save. Despite this, I managed to not do it on 2 separate servers when I was a little tyke. But it was something that you had to go and revert with a later update. Now, if that didn't get you, this was also the update that allowed you to ignite TNT with redstone. which might not sound like a huge increase, but before you had to right click it and it would activate the TNT. But with Redstone being able to activate it, you could activate a lot more all at the same time. Pretty much if you were a server and the Pistons didn't get you, the TNT did. With the addition of Pistons and sticky Pistons, we were able to make a T flip-flop design that looks something like this, where we have the output off, we can turn it on, and then we can turn it back off again. These are both sticky Pistons, and this is a much more condensed version of the T flip-flop than what we had to make before. I am skeptical that this design actually worked in 1.7 beta when Pistons were added. I'm assuming it worked a little bit later when some of the bugs were hashed out. This doesn't work in Bedrock Edition nowadays, but because Bedrock Edition wasn't out yet, this is what everybody used for T flip-flops. Now, once everyone recovered from beta 1.7, beta 1.8 added gates that you could right-click to open, as well as open and close them with Redstone. Java 1.2.1 added redstone lamps, as well as the ability to place redstone torches and normal torches on top of glass. You could still not place them on the sides of glass, it was only on the top of them. Redstone lamps were really convenient, especially at the time though, because they were the first directly controllable light source that you could turn off and on with a redstone signal. Light sources in general back then were kind of hard to come by. You basically had like lava and glowstone and normal torches, and that was kind of it. This was something that was really useful because it was a light level of 15, which is the maximum, as well as something that you could control directly. Java 1.3.1 added tripwires, which allow you to walk over a set of string that you place on the ground and have it emit a redstone signal. It also added extra functionality for the dispensers, the biggest one being that they can now dispense and take away buckets of fluid, water and lava. This was convenient because otherwise there was no other way to automatically do that back then. So in order to put fluid into the world, you had to go do it manually. But this allowed you to make things like automatic sugarcane farms and stuff like that. They also changed how pistons work a little bit. So instead of pistons extending the same tick that you give it a block update, so mainly if I place this torch here, instead of trying to extend the same tick that I place it, it now waits a redstone tick before it extends. This ended up breaking some stuff that relied on the timing of the pistons, but it also fixed a lot of issues because part of the reason they were so buggy was because they tried to do it too soon and the game kind of didn't know what to do there. Java 1.4.2 added command blocks, which automatically allow you to run commands, just like if you were, putting commands into the chat here, using a redstone signal. So if I put, for example, /time set night into the command block and hit done, I could then power the command block and it sets the time to night. And this is really convenient for things like servers, where you might want to do certain things such as give players items, but you don't want to install a bunch of plugins, and do stuff like that. So I gotta set my time back. All right. This update also increased the length that buttons stay on for by 1 redstone tick, which is 1/5 of a second. Or 2 redstone ticks, which is 1/5 of a second. So they used to be a lot shorter, and they just made them longer in this update. I don't know if there was any technical reason for that, other than maybe like they were just more convenient to use. But they got longer. All right, the button situation is actually a lot more complicated than I thought. So one source says that they increased the duration of the of the button by 2 redstone ticks, which is what I said. But there's a different source that says they increased it by 3 redstone ticks from 9 to 12 redstone ticks. But the problem is the stun button is on for 10 redstone ticks, which I tested to make sure that that was actually true. And they also added wooden buttons at the same time, but I'm ignoring those for now. So I don't know which one is actually correct, but I'm assuming that they increased it from 8 redstone ticks to 10, and then they left it as 10, which is what it is today. They also added wooden buttons at the same time, and these ones stay on for 15 redstone ticks, and I believe they just added that as that time, and it hasn't changed since then. They also allowed you to lock repeaters. So a repeater will essentially just propagate your signal through to the end with a short delay. This update allowed you to put another repeater into the side of a repeater and lock that repeater so that it doesn't accept any more signal. So you basically either lock it on off or you can lock it on. And this was convenient if you wanted to make like memory cells, which are called like SR latches and stuff. Or you wanted to make something else where like you might want a signal to go through for a while, and then after a while you might want to lock it, such as like if you're making a door and you want to have a way to open it, but then when you're inside you don't want the door to be able to be opened from the outside, for example. Now, at this point in the update cycle, Minecraft Bedrock Edition, or Pocket Edition as it was known, was a lot more popular and was actually out as a real version. The T flip-flop design with the pistons doesn't work in that version, so you had to make T flip-flops with locked repeaters. I think this is usually one of the more simpler ones to make, where I have a pulse limiter here with a sticky piston, and we can see that it kind of toggles this output whenever we give it an input. All right, now Java 1.5, which was known as the Redstone update, was a massive game changer. It added a huge amount of stuff. Most of them are things that you couldn't do before with other workarounds or other structures. So the first thing that it had is Activator Rail, which allows you to activate rails. You also had a redstone block, and a redstone block is unique in the fact that it is a block that powers stuff. So everything I put next to it will be powered. But it's a weakly powered block, so I don't have things that get powered through the block, even though that's how I expect, for example, a repeater to operate. They can also be pushed by pistons, which is really convenient if you need to get a signal source somewhere, and a piston's more convenient than a torch or something. There's daylight sensors, which allow you to get a signal based on the time of day. It's maximum signal strength during the day, and then dusk and dawn are lower signal strength. You can right click on it and it will reverse the behavior so it's on during the night. They also added droppers, which is exactly as a dispenser, but it will drop items as an entity rather than potentially shooting arrows or anything like that. So arrows would drop as an item rather than shooting it. They also added comparators, and these are super, super, super helpful. In addition to adding the comparators, they also added the functionality of other components that had already existed, such as chests, to work with the comparator. Before the comparator, you were not able to read if something had contents in it. So this dropper has stuff in it. There was no way for me to know that ahead of time. But now with comparators, you can get a signal strength based on the number of things you have inside of a container. Comparators also allow you to do subtracting. So if I right click it and put the torch on in the front, and then I do a signal strength of 14 on the side, and then a signal strength of 15 on the back, I can subtract them and get a signal strength of 1. And this is also really convenient, especially if you are working with things that require signal strength, such as reading containers often give you signal strength based on how much is in there. So this was really hard to do. This was not impossible to do, but it was hard to do. And there's no reason to do it without comparators anyways. But now you can subtract signal strength from each other. They also added hoppers, and this is another game changer. Hoppers, of course, automatically grab items on top of them. Before, there was no way to do this. You had to either use mods or you had to just pick stuff up yourself and AFK somewhere. But with hoppers, you don't have to AFK in some collection chamber. You could automate it with a hopper that puts it into a chest. So these are super, super nice to have. They also added the iron and gold weighted pressure plates, which behave differently with different mobs and entities and stuff like that. They also added the trapped chest, which is like a normal chest, but it emits a redstone signal when it's open, which allows you to make traps and stuff like that. They also made it where dispensers can face all 6 directions. So I think before they could only face horizontally, but now they can face up and down. They also added extra functionality to them, such as being able to use bone meal, for example, on plants and ignite TNT and stuff. With the addition of comparators, they allow us to make an XOR gate or an exclusive OR gate in a much more compact way than we had to before. So if we do something that looks like this, where we have both of the comparators in subtract mode, we can have an XOR gate, which is on if one input's on and off if both inputs are the same. So you can see that that is true right now. Before we had to make a more complicated contraption that I showed you earlier. So we essentially take it from this to this now. It might not look like a huge size saver, but the thing is this is 1 block wide, whereas the other one had torches that required it to be 3 blocks wide, which is really annoying. Java 1.8 added additional doors for the different types of wood in the game. They also added different gates, which I didn't show here. They work exactly the same as the oak door, which is already in the game. They just look different. They also added iron trapdoors, which are similar to iron doors in that you cannot right-click them in order to open them, but they behave the same where they will open and close with redstone, just like other trapdoors do. This update also added slime blocks, and these were really convenient because now you can push and pull multiple blocks with one piston, all in the same go. They also stick to sticky pistons, so you can push and pull them back. This was super convenient for things like doors and stuff. Java Edition 1.9 added chain command blocks, which are again very useful for servers, where instead of having to make a redstone signal go into all of your command blocks, you're able to trigger command blocks off of other command blocks. So I should do that. I can turn it to night using command block, and then you saw me change the time back to day. I could do that all in one go with command blocks, and in fact, you can't even see it do it. If I get rid of this one, you can see that I am in fact turning it into night first. Java 1.11 added one major thing to the game, but that thing was the observer. The observer was a huge addition to the game because it allowed you to do a lot of things easier, as well as do things that you weren't able to do before. I think the biggest addition was the ability to make flying machines. You basically just had people flying around on flying machines, which allows you to do things like automatic crop harvesting for giant farms, as well as just kind of get around the map a little bit faster. Getting around the map was a little bit buggy, but it did work. Getting around to end cities was also a way you could use the flying machine. Observers also were able to just like make automatic crop harvesting easier, where you could like watch sugarcane or something grow and harvest it without having to use a timer. You could also use it as a pulse shortener, pulse limiter. I have a pulse going in and it shortens the pulse coming out. You can also make timers with it, among other things. And these are just like some examples of what you can use them for, but they are a massive addition to the game. Java 1.13 added the other wood variants for trapdoors, pressure plates, and buttons. Java 1.14 added lecterns, which aren't necessarily a redstone component, but they can be read with a comparator when you change the book page. So I'm including it right now. There's also scaffolding added in this update, and this is really convenient when you're making redstone contraptions. So not necessarily a redstone component, but it's convenient when you're making them. The redstone related thing though is that we can now pretty much place all redstone components on top of glass, on the side of glass. Transparent blocks are nice because this allows you to do things that you wouldn't be able to do with other blocks, such as this, where we have redstone signal that is on, but the torches are not turning off. And that's because transparent blocks do not carry redstone signals. But before we could place anything on the glass, there was nothing we could do, because if we couldn't place anything on the glass, you couldn't utilize this capability. So this is really convenient that you can use sometimes if you're trying to like isolate torches away from other signals, and you have very compact circuits. Java 1.15 added honey blocks, which are pretty much the exact same thing as slime blocks, where they will be able to push and pull extra blocks when a piston pushes them. They are, however, transparent. So if you take a slime block and a honey block and put a redstone signal into them, which I'll do right now, the honey block will not transmit the signal, whereas the slime block will. So this actually does matter when you're making flying machines. You have to be careful with the honey blocks because the observers rely on the signal being transferred. Otherwise, they work exactly the same. And with the addition of honey blocks, they also are independent of the slime blocks. So when we have blocks like this, we can power these pistons independently of each other, and they don't stick to each other. So this allows us to make... Okay, well, these stick to these blocks, but otherwise these don't stick to each other. This allows us to make much more sophisticated flying machines, as well as other sophisticated contraptions such as doors. A lot of the doors on my channel rely on the fact that slime and honey are independent, so that we can make like the 4x4 door, for example. Java Edition 1.16 added the target, which will emit a redstone signal when you hit it with an arrow. This is also when COVID started. Java 1.17 added the Sculk sensor. This was the first time that we were able to get a redstone signal based on sounds. Before this, you had to accomplish your goals some other way, but now we can directly get the redstone signal from sounds such as players falling and walking around, doors opening, pistons pushing, and whatever. Java 1.19 added Sculk Shriekers, which themselves aren't a redstone component really, but they are triggered by Sculk sensors, which gives them a little bit more functionality. This update also added the mangrove related things. So we have our pressure plate, gate, trapdoor, and door. And I might have actually... Do we have a button? I might have forgot the button. Mangrove button. This is when the tree was added. So they just added all of the components for us. Java 1.20 gave us calibrated Sculk sensors, which are like normal Sculk sensors, but better. They have a higher range, and they also let you tune into a specific type of sound. So sometimes you don't want the sensor to activate with every sound, only a very specific one like a mob or something. We also got chiseled bookshelves, which allow you to essentially put actual books in actual slots, which is really convenient. And as a redstone component, it lets you read which slot was interacted with last with a comparator. If I grab one of the comparators I have, we can see that it is reading stuff from the back of it. And this can be used for combination door locks, among other things. We also got cherry wood and bamboo, so we got the associated components with that. Java 1.21 was also a massive game changer in that we got not only the automatic crafter, but we got the copper bulb, which I will get to in a second. The automatic crafter does exactly what you think it does. It lets you automatically craft items in a crafter, which is very, very nice. So if I take my gold ingots from my hopper here, and I have this little circuit here that will trigger when it has 9 things in it, we can see that it automatically crafts me gold blocks. So this was the first time without mods that we were able to automatically craft things in the game. We were of course able to automatically like smelt stuff because we had the hoppers and they interact with furnaces and things, but we never actually had a way to craft things. So this was a huge game changer for things like automatic farms among pretty much any other automatic crafting that you can do. We also got copper doors and trapdoors here. These are pretty straightforward. Now we also got the copper bulb in this update, which is a directly controllable light source just like the redstone lamp, but it's unique in the fact that it toggles its state rather than holding it on when the input is on and then turning off. So we kind of have to toggle it, which is really convenient in some cases. However, Mojang was really, really nice to us, and they let us read the state using a comparator. So that it's off when the lamp is off, and then it's on when the lamp is on. This just so happens to be what you have to do for a T flip-flop. So basically we went from this to this. This is obviously way more compact, and it's even more compact than the Piston version or the locked repeater version of the T flip-flop. So this is really convenient, and this also works in both Java and Bedrock editions of the game. So this was a very, very convenient addition to the game, and it's pretty much replaced all T flip-flops because it's just far superior to any other designs. Now, before Redstone was added into the game, gears actually existed in the game, and you could place them on blocks and they would kind of spin around. As far as I know, they didn't actually do anything, but the model was there and you could have it as an item. I can't show you in game because this version is considered a lost version, which I believe is Infdev 0.31. So there's no official way to get it anymore. I speculate that this was a predecessor idea to the Redstone, where instead of Redstone, you'd have like mechanical gears and stuff in order to open doors and do whatever you're going to do. It was removed shortly after and replaced with Redstone. Alright guys, that'll be it for this video. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you next time.